pipes. So later in this year and get a contractor on board to do some upgrades and whatnot. One of the things that just recently happened, North Point is part of New Era, the Northern Utah Environmental Resource Agency, and there's 4 member entities: North Point, South Utah Valley, Transjordan Landfill, and Wasatch Integrated up in Davis and Morgan counties. We all own the Bayview landfill, and are recently in a New Era meeting, the board increased our rates by $1 a ton. So my last slide here is just a history of what North Point's fees have been over the years. So in July, North Point is going to have to start paying an extra $1 a ton to Bayview. So I'm projecting that there's a possibility that when my board meets, that we will hold a public hearing and possibly increase that fee starting in January. With the cities now doing their budgets, I'm trying to get out in front of them to say, hey, please anticipate that. And then I anticipate maybe another 50 cents come January 26th. That one will just, when I get to my budget, The unfortunate part is we're on the different cycle as the cities, and sometimes that makes it a little bit difficult, but
Fiscal year, January to December.
yeah. So that's just what the $37 a ton for the residential curbside fee is what I'm gonna anticipate going up to in July. If we can hold that off until January, if our budget will allow that to, we'll hold that off till January, but I got to get those numbers together for my board. So, any questions? Well, that's all I have.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, thank you.
Next up, we got item 2.2. And that's going to be Jay Summers, our deputy city attorney.
Good save. Mayor and council, thanks for having me again. This is meant to be an update as to what has occurred since our last work session, how we're progressing and moving forward with any of the potential changes and the proposed ordinance for short-term regulations. So since our last work session, both the council as well as city staff, we've received an increase of communications, emails, phone calls regarding concerns about, one, any proposed ordinances, and then secondly, how that ordinance may affect neighborhoods. So we've seen kind of two different groups, those that are in favor in generally of short-term rentals, and the neighbors who are concerned about how a short-term rental in their neighborhood would impact their home and their lifestyle within the neighborhood. So just as a summary as to kind of what the two different groups have represented as we've met with them and heard their concerns and perspectives is, first, the most common issues raised with the proposed ordinance as it looks now is occupancy limits. That was a very common refrain, is concern about the number of being 8, capping occupancy at 8 for short-term rental would significantly impact the finance feasibility of running a short-term rental. Secondly was the idea of nightly rental limits, or capping the number of nights to be rented at 182 for the calendar year. The third was geographical spacing restrictions. This was the spacing requirement that a short-term rental could not be located within 1,000 feet of another short-term rental. And then the other area that was of great concern was the numerical cap on the total number of short-term rentals licenses that the city would potentially issue. So those were generally the 4 most addressed issues by those that spoke in favor of short-term rentals. Additionally, the individuals and groups that we met with, they represented that they believe that short-term rental properties are generally better maintained and cause fewer neighborhood problems than long-term rentals. Some of their reasons for that is that their arguments were that because their business model is based off of reviews, that it's an incentive for them to maintain properties in a way that maybe a long-term landlord wouldn't. entertain grandfathering, but their desires are that there be some sort of preferential treatment or some sort of priority given to those that could show they were in operation before and they're good operators. The third is they expressed a desire for some sort of a community commission on short-term rentals. They wanted to form a commission, a committee, and be able to somehow affect enforcement policy as well as just general policy as far as regulation. So these were the perspectives and concerns we've heard from those that were in favor of short-term rentals. We've also met with a number of neighbors and people who are located near short-term rentals. The most common issues we heard were issues relating to on-street parking. Examples were given of numbers of cars that are parked there. Even if the driveway's open or there are two, and those are two spots in tandem, that they don't see people use all four spots. They'll use the two spots in the driveway and then they park on the street so they don't have to shuffle cars around. And so there's been concerns about on-street parking, as well as most recently over the weekend, we had an incident where a school bus again dropped off a team or a youth group at a short-term rental here within the city, causing, again, the bus is parked there in the middle of the neighborhood as it's loading and unloading individuals and luggage and whatnot. So again, issues with parking in large groups. Another homeowner, and this was not just a one-off, but this homeowner kept affecting their ability to quietly enjoy their own home. So a short-term rental is located, they're next door neighbors. The short-term rental is located in the basement. And this particular short-term rental has a drop box for keys. And so individuals can check in at any hour of the day. And oftentimes they will have individuals checking in at 11 o'clock or at midnight. So at that point, they come to check in, security lights go on outside of the home. At that point, lights are now shining into their master bedroom. The homeowner reached out to the owner of the short-term rental and said, "Hey, you've got some light trespass, and it's waking us up at midnight, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning." And the short-term rental owner said, "Well, tough, I can do it. Deal with it. Close your blinds, move on." And so it was an example of, again, real concern of, if a business is operating and a neighbor's trying to address it, and they're saying, we don't need to do it. We don't need to deal with you because there's no regulation on this. It becomes a real concern about how does this impact the livelihood, not the livelihood, but the lifestyle and the quiet enjoyment of one's home. Noise and general safety concerns were also brought forward. Again, large groups, especially when you get large youth groups together, there were concerns about noise and impact. And then there was particular safety concerns about proximity to schools. You've got people who are not familiar with neighborhoods, not familiar with the safe walking routes of elementary schools. And they're not necessarily on the lookout for kids as they're walking to and from an elementary school. And so that was one of the issues brought forward. These groups generally advocated for a restriction of short-term rentals. However, if a short-term rental restriction or prohibition is not workable, then a licensing system which regulates use and desired. Further,
Was that thing that you say it's
this is for the neighbors of short-term rental. So I would generally categorize them as anti-short-term rental, because that's what we've generally heard from neighbors of short-term rentals is, this is affecting my property. I wish it wasn't here. So I would categorize them as anti-short-term rentals.
And it's density. Number of rentals, number of people.
Number of rentals. Again, if we go back to about 18 months ago, the Goat House, that neighborhood, one of their concerns was we have this short-term rental, you go around the block, we have another short-term rental. At what point does our neighborhood just turn into a resort community as opposed to an actual neighborhood? And then last would be, how do we effectively address those short-term renters if we create a licensing system? How do we have some sort of mechanism to ban or prohibit short-term rental operators that continue to violate our regulations? There is consensus amongst the groups and where we can build on that. And that is both between the short-term rental operators as well as neighborhood groups. Their interests were, if we are to have a short-term rental licensing program, that there be some sort of focus on operations that we can help mitigate the impact on the neighborhood. What are the ways that we can focus on bad actors or bad tenants of short-term rentals? So the very first area that I would like to get direction and clarity from the council is on parking requirements, on a parking plan, parking requirements for short-term rentals. Our current version provides that the short-term rental must provide one off-street parking spot per bedroom, up to 4 off-street parking spots. I wanted to use Logan as an example of how they have addressed parking. Logan requires one off-street parking spot per 2 bedrooms. So if a short-term rental has one bedroom, its capped occupancy is 4, and it requires 1 parking spot. So they any thoughts on it?
One bedroom, 4 occupancy, and 1 bedroom.
So the way Logan's ordinance work so 4 bedrooms, 10 occupants, and then it'd be required of 2 parking
And if
spots.
there's 4 bunks in there, that's still 2, the way they do it?
Yes.
Okay.
The other way we could do this, yes,
Yeah, for us. I think something like that works, but one like. From my perspective, probably the biggest single issue is the parking. You don't want to be in the parking nightmare throughout the neighborhood, so. How is this driven parking to be a priority that we have, the parking.
so, and that leads me to the second is we could tie occupancy and parking spots together. So, for example, we could require 1.5 occupants per parking spot. So if they provide four off.
I mean, most people are gonna think that's pretty high, 1.5. For a parking spot.
Correct. But again, as I have met with short-term rental operators, one of the common themes is we provide ample off-street parking. And so if they do provide ample off-street parking, then again, I think this really ties occupancy to the parking.
And I think it's 2 per car or per. The off-street parking makes more sense than 1.
Okay, again, this is erring on the side of being more conservative as opposed to erring on the side of being more liberal.
Or less
No,
business friendly.
Correct. Again, the concern where this has been a common refrain from neighbors is parking is one of the main pinch points in short-term rentals. I think it is in the best interest to perhaps err on the side of caution and see how it goes, because it's easier to relax a requirement than to tighten the requirement.
And are we currently one off-street parking spot per bedroom parking for?
Correct. That's the current proposal.
Current draft.
So after hearing from the different groups, this would be, do we want to approach this a different way?
Who did you go before, Logan?
Yes.
Have they had trouble with theirs?
So recently we went down for a city attorney's conference. I had the chance to speak with Logan City's attorney group. In favor of short-term rentals because they wanted to operate a short-term rental. After we passed our ordinance, then we had a bit of blowback. We had a bit of negative they then had to tighten the regulations, and they've had to go through multiple iterations of their code to get to where they feel.
And where are they at now?
So on parking, it's what I've presented up here is that they've tied it to both occupancy as well as to bedrooms. So again, for one off-street parking per 2 bedrooms.
Less like-
That's four.
I'm proposing something more conservative than that.
Well, just clarify, there are four. Four, two,
Correct. Okay.
I personally think two makes no sense because then you see more people coming together, at least there's two, for sure.
So when you say two per occupant, one spot per 2 occupants or 2 bedrooms.
Two people in car and one spot.
I
I guess that's my
maximum
question.
to number of parking stalls based on 2 occupants per parking stall.
Well, I mean, I think I feel better about that one now.
I mean, I'm trying to figure out, because we're talking parking, how many cars are we gonna have at that house, right? You have a 4-bedroom house. How many cars are we gonna allow in the house? Because they're gonna have 2 parking in the driveway.
Four, right?
Yeah, if they're saying they don't do the tandem one, though, if that's not happening.
So it has been a the concern is tandem parking does not generally occur. They need whoever's toward them naturally. Human behavior is, we're not going to tandem park. We're going to park 1, 2, 3, 4 on the road.
So in other words, in the parking stall calculation, I don't think we would count, and we would only count stalls that are not in the. So if you had a garage in the driveway, counting the garage and the driveway, we can't count that.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
So essentially, you have like 2 car garage down, 2 spots, 3 car garage.
correct.
Or if you don't decide, Pat.
Size pad.
And that could be done with time, you have to see the 1.5.
Correct.
You're starting off tight, and if it has to expand, then you can adjust it. You start high, you can't adjust.
Because really what we're looking for, I don't know, maybe I'm misspeaking here, but to me, what I see as a positive use for the short-term rentals is what these people have told me about, is families coming to visit, coming to Orem for a reason, bringing their families. I mean, if we start adding separating cars, more cars were getting back to the goat house sorority, reunions, party houses, opportunities for that to occur.
Correct.
So what you're saying is, if the reason you want to do it conservatively is you're saying the 1.5, we can see if it actually creates a problem for families to come, while still ensuring that we're not having these party house, events occur.
That is correct.
Somehow I don't understand this, but if you, because if we go 1.5, without the constraint, so. Regarding the
2 spots equals 3 people. 2 parking spots equals 3 people.
I don't know.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'm confused. So are we-
Okay,
we're only
so-
3 people
so-
in the house, or-
Okay, so if you come back to, if you're basing occupancy off of parking spots. So if you have 2 parking spots, 5 occupants per parking spot, 2 parking spots equals 3.
The way to
So,
the way
yeah.
restricted. So can I ask a dumb
Backwards.
question?
Yes,
How? Maybe this is a discussion for another time, but how many complaints do we have? Data that shows how many complaints we have. A given time from throughout a year. Neighbors and short term rentals on parking, on lights, on. And with those complaints.
you you have an issue where you have neighbors and you create a tension within a neighborhood of reporting on a neighbor. How likely is to say their security lights keeping up? I mean,
It's bothering me, I probably would.
I mean, I haven't.
I luckily don't have that problem, but. Yeah, I don't see that as an issue, but other things, so if they were parking on the street and there's no. Those kind of issues, I could see that concern, if somebody's light comes on, I might get those. But I think there are some other more weighty issues that. I think people would be more inclined to, I'm concerned about, like you go to house and other situations that we've heard about. But I'm just wondering. How big of an issue, obviously it's a big issue, but I'm just wondering.
none of these short-term rentals are licensed. I mean, there is not a license for these short-term rentals within the city. So given that, again, I think generally neighbors haven't made complaints because there's not necessarily been an avenue or regulation for them to do so. If we now create regulations, it does provide an avenue for neighbors to more readily report this to our neighborhood improvement team. So I'm going to spin back to the parking issue so we can then move on to other areas. Is it a correct assumption that the council would like to see something more liberal than the 1 parking spot for 1.5 occupancy? Is
So
that
this is what I'm looking at. Okay, look at your chart there. We've got 2 parking stalls in 2 different columns, and one of them you have 8 occupants, the other one you have an opportunity for 10, depending on how many bedrooms, right?
Mhm.
So 2-car garage, I mean. I don't know. Yeah, 2 parking spots. Guess I'm looking at occupancy. I'm looking at parking stalls too, but if the one point you have a one car garage, then you've gotta be one car, right? I guess the only tricky thing is, you know, husband, wife, 2 kids. How big are those houses here? I rented one of them, one of the movie still homes with pretty small. They have a buddy. So I keep coming back. I mean, I would like to kind of think about this for a little bit, but to me, it seems pretty reasonable. If this is your 1.5, that's our current version that's showing up there on the chart.
So the chart is Logan City. I was using Logan as an example of kind of a method of tying bedrooms, occupancy, and parking
Okay,
together.
so you do an 8 to 10, which is kind of where we were when we started out, based on the size of the home.
Correct.
You have a 3-bedroom house. How many people you can put in there? You got a master suite, that's 2 people. You got 6 more people when you put in 2 other bedrooms. Maybe 3. I mean, let's think about that for a second, right? You can have kids, that makes sense, but are we adults? Or how many cars are you gonna have? You see what I'm saying here? To me, it doesn't agree. Who are they? And does this work? Is it?
That is this balancing test that we're all engaged in.
What I'm hearing is that it seems to be some amount of openness and this positive feel to what Logan has put together. But I think that's the same thing though. There too. So
I want to rent this Airbnb, we gotta take 2 cars. Go there,
but what I'm saying is.
because you have to own 1.5 per car.
Per stall.
You're right,
Yeah, what I'm saying, Tom, is that's not what he's trying.
No, this is Logan, and I like Logan better than what he suggested.
He's saying, use Logan's model, just put one down.
Yeah.
No, actually, Mayor, I'm saying that is one avenue we could approach is the Logan model. Or we could tie strictly to parking stalls to occupancy.
How do you do a min? I mean, your example would be this, right?
Yeah.
So maybe the 1.5 kicks in at 3 bedrooms. You know? Go ahead. Yeah.
We kind of want to see a chart.
Right, one that shows the ones.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is you like the Logan model with the chart. You would like to also see a version with a ratio around 1.5 to compare.
Right. So we don't have the sewer.
With a possible floor and ceiling, maximum.
So just to be clear, so you're kind of suggesting that maybe 2 parking stalls get you a baseline, whether that's 6 or 8 or something like that. And then for each additional stall, then you get 1.5 or 2 or whatever.
Well, yeah, something more than 1.5, yeah.
Whatever. that
Because
means.
the 1.5 of the base is not even, I mean,
Something.
it's not. Now, why put that?
So to repeat what I think Steve said, 2 cars get you 8 people if that's the thing. But if you have a bigger place. I mean, I don't think most of.
We're going to address occupancy, I think,
Okay.
later too. Okay, so
I guess we need to chart.
Yeah. okay, these next I don't think will be as intensive as far as the conversation and questions, but other areas, these were not controversial amongst either group. Is requiring a owner representative to be available 24/7 to be able to respond on site to any sort of calls. The reasoning we would do this is it helps provide prompt responses to complaints and emergencies of the home. It aids with us in enforcement of local regulations because we have a contact person that our NIT team can go out and meet with. It also aids in making sure the properties are maintained and that guests that are renting are safe and we have up-to-date inspections of the home. It also helps maintain a local presence. They're part of the community. And then also addressing any potential negative impacts to the neighborhood. One of the anecdotal stories was somebody was living next to a short-term rental. They made no headway with the out-of-state homeowner that was operating it. But once they got the property manager involved, the issues were alleviated because the property manager stepped in. But it took a bit of detective work from the neighbor to figure out who was managing the property. Because the short-term rental owner didn't ever give that information to the neighbor. So again, that would aid both the city as well as neighbors in alleviating those concerns. General property maintenance, we would obviously want them to follow all of our landscaping rules, all of our maintenance rules, snow removal, et cetera. We'd want that location to be safe. Again, a very non-controversial issue amongst either group. Quiet hours. One of the things that we would look to do is to align our proposed ordinance with our disturbing the peace ordinance. It was brought to our attention that there was a bit of a discrepancy between the two. And so I think we would just look to bring those in line. The quiet hours were a bit more restrictive than the disturbing the peace ordinance. Are there any concerns about aligning our disturbing the peace ordinance and our quiet hours, bring them into alignment there?
You don't have quiet hours required to 10 a.m. in homes, right?
Correct, and that's why we would be bringing it more in alignment with the disturbing the
Okay,
peace.
yeah. So you're thinking more like 7?
Yes.
Pull off the 10 a.m. stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. And again, restricting some of the more, I guess, attractive nuisance on properties, their uses after those quiet hours, hot tubs, pools, perhaps outdoor sports, et cetera, to help the neighborhood quiet down in the evenings.
So you mean, where you have use of pools and hot tubs during 5 hours, you mean restricted use?
Correct.
What if they have an indoor pool or hot tub? You already split them.
I would even restrict that because oftentimes you could get the noise emanating depending on the structure that encloses the swimming pool. Okay. So it would be prohibited between the hours of 10:30 p.m. and 7 a.m. Apparently this video does not want to work down here. But one of the other things that I would also recommend that we look at adopting is a provision that would require short-term rental operators to use or monitor decibels within the home. This is a common practice now amongst many Airbnb and VRBO operators in that they place the decibel monitor within the home or on the premises of the home. And it doesn't monitor conversations. It doesn't, invade any privacy. All it is doing is monitoring the decibel level. If the decibel level goes over a set amount and does so for an extended period of time, then the property manager or the homeowner is alerted, and then they can come out and intervene and mitigate the noise issue without having neighbors have to file that in.
How expensive is that?
I'm not sure the pricing of that, as I've talked to at least 2 different short-term rental operators who operate in multiple Airbnbs along the Wasatch Front. This might have a little bit more controversy, but this would be something that I think, again, we would want to maintain is this is a residential neighborhood. We would want to maintain what is currently in the proposed regulation of only allowing short-term rentals to be used for overnight accommodations. That they are not to be used as event centers, weddings, concerts, corporate events, etc. This is one of those areas that oftentimes a venue then turns into a party house. Again, this is something that Airbnb has, over the last couple of years, has put out programming as well as their internal regulations. They've created a way for neighbors to report to Airbnb party houses. So this is not just somebody calling, wolf. This is a common issue that is out there with Airbnb and VRBOs is party homes. And again, I think we would want to restrict it to overnight accommodations. Are there any questions or concerns about that?
Party Palace, maybe.
I don't have time.
Probably have enough to get.
Yeah.
Okay, so occupancy limits. So currently in our proposed draft is 2 individuals per bedroom, 1 per bedroom that is of 70 to 99 square feet. No occupancy in a bedroom less than 70 square feet with a maximum of 8 individuals.
No matter the size of the house.
Correct. Now, the last time we were in work session, there was discussion about increasing that amount. As we have reviewed that, there are concerns that we have as to how increase other areas of regulation within city code for occupancy. And so we would be very hesitant to move forward with just creating a larger number for unrelated individuals. A possible solution would be adopting a single family definition and not putting a cap on the single family definition. So you could have a single family, it's 12 or 14, and it wouldn't violate a maximum cap. But then we would have a maximum cap as it pertains to unrelated individuals. And that maximum cap would be 8. So this could still potentially address some of the issues that were raised at our last work session of we will have a large family, we want to have a family get together, a family reunion. Well, grandparents can rent the property if they have their 3 or 4 adult children and spouses, and then they're we want these families to come here because they're here to celebrate a graduation, or they're here for a funeral, or they're here for a family reunion, and to recreate as a family. We could use the single family definition. But then by limiting it to 8 unrelated individuals, we are also potentially mitigating a future party or other sort of nuisance in the neighborhood. Are there any comments?
So unrelated individuals, and then that would be also guided by, you can't have 8 cars. Okay.
Well, again, that's why we'd have the parking requirement. Right? So we're trying to use them in tandem. Well, this comes back to
Trying to figure out who will.
little bit more convoluted to enforce, because you could have 2 families and they say, we're siblings. How do we enforce that? That becomes more problematic. But what it does is also addresses some of the concerns we've seen with the school bus rolling up and it's a youth team group. So again, this is the balance of trying to address how do we allow for what I've heard the council saying is we want to have families and we have large families. We want to provide that avenue, but yet how do we also mitigate the potential risk of having a large unrelated group that turns into being a nuisance within a neighborhood?
Just thinking through, it seems like not only really force it will be from neighbors complaining, right? You know, as much as like neighbors complaining, and they things that. And then what goes out there and affects all.
Correct,
Like we all want to do, it's not a violation.
correct. Any other comments, concerns? What I'm hearing is-
Final numbers on this. Yeah, maximum unrelated date, what's the final number?
The family number would be, again, based on individuals per bedroom. So we would use a bedroom occupancy as opposed to a total occupancy,
Betsy's having those, right?
yes.
I'm okay with an 8 max on a 2,000 square foot home. I'm not okay with that on a 10,000, 6,000 square foot home. That's something else. Yeah, 7,000, 8,000 square foot home with 8 bedrooms. That person can't make it work if all of a sudden he or she doesn't work. So I think you need to do something on a bigger. One size fits none is what our friend here.
One
Yeah.
size misfits all.
Misfits all, thank you. That's our friend from the Utah League of City and Towns, and I think that's what we're doing.
So, right, yeah, once again, I think we're kind of looking for a combination balance. Customized approach, but still. This
But
is
some
larger.
exception, yeah, gotta have some exceptions.
So Jake, are we talking about, I mean, there's two situations, right? There's a homeowner occupied. That it's a big home and the homeowner lives. The homeowner not living there. So is there something in there that we talked about that could
So,
help that situation, because they are on the fence?
so we could create, and this is not in this presentation. Another solution could be is that we have one set of regulations for owner occupied. And we have another set of regulations for non-owner.
I mean, I like, because
Yeah,
the different
so like,
standards.
there's a difference. I feel like if the owner's there, that's gonna eliminate 90% of the problem.
Correct.
And
Or should they be?
I'm being conservative. So, yeah, I agree with that, because one of the things that you seem to hear a lot was people coming, families coming to Orem, but they're not from here. I mean, this is a gathering place. They were originally from here, or they come here, but they're not staying with families. They're coming somewhere that has a place big enough to hold everybody, so that they can enjoy their time together. And I don't think putting it helps those situations where it makes sense if they're large enough to be able to do that. I think that's important to not have a rubber stamp. And nice to have a little flexibility in those situations like that.
So,
So that could be controlled to some extent, but the problem there would be part.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then we make it constantly figure it out.
Well, and frankly, you know, when I go with the tellers to my family, sometimes I gotta get that other room. I don't want to, but I gotta pay for that other room. So if we're having a family reunion, maybe you gotta get 2 houses. And find a good 2 houses, and you know, and that. And then you play cards in one house and there's 2 in another. So there's solutions, you know, it's good.
Yeah, depending on where you're planning on that, I mean, you're saying this for, staying overnight. There's some fun to avoid party violence. So, it's a nice somewhere there.
I think I'm over time, Mayor. I'm happy to continue, but I also want to keep you on schedule with your agenda.
So, I guess my only question is, so we're gonna look at the, so it's nothing. I think it's in November next year. That's we have kind of thing sufficient things I can do.
Over there, that.
So I'm not, I feel like we still have a lot.
I think we do.
to talk about. Yeah. And I liked, I think your first slide said something about. Maybe, a group of people coming together to help in the process, would that make it harder?
No, that's actually after, right?
So there, I mean, I've heard both from, I'll be frank, I've heard both from the group. The worry, I do have worries that if we get a commission, you can sometimes create a camel. Right? That rather than creating the horse, you create the camel. So I'm still listening to feedback. I'm getting emails on a weekly basis from different groups. I'm happy to continue to filter that for the council and the mayor. Allow, and then to come back and present again of here are our next steps. This is the next 2 or 3 topics for us to address.
I would say Jake has been more receiving the information, posing it down, and then coming back and sharing with your council. And really get a bunch of responsibility and close out to the input and, yeah, maybe to the committee. But I think Jake's truly been doing it now.
Again, we got a lot of good feedback that you are listening and gathering, so that's what we ask you to do. And there's 2 sides to the story. The vocal group is the perfect normal group that owns the property, right? So, no, I think we just need to keep moving forward and the group is there.
I think it's tricky because, we're representing to represent the citizens, represent the neighborhoods, keep the integrity of the neighborhood, that's, what our role is. And so, I think kind of what you said about Logan, if you look ownership and now, they're very, financial, because they care the most right now. But we need to make sure that the neighborhood and everyone else are represented in the process. And if we found that the lady, I'm not sure how that would work. I think it's best to just, gather as much information as we can from the recommend order and the residents. And I think we're getting a lot of good information from some of the rental organizations. And the solution to my software, as this is what has worked in other areas, and this is what does not work. So I think we working through it, but as far as so I'd like to see us be going down this path, get an agreement with the council on what we think we're going to do that. And then at that point, we're going to go to city council meeting.
I have carried this things on for presentation, so I think you guys are all here, so I'd like to see the rest of the presentation. I don't know, what do you guys think?
You do a half hour?
So the only other area that I wanted to talk about today was spacing, or not spacing, but was our numerical cap. So that conversation I would anticipate would be another 10 to 15 minutes. Okay. So the next area that has been, something of concern for the short-term rental group is at our previous work sessions, we proposed a cap at approximately 100 short-term rental licenses. The way we reached that is by looking at basically issuing 3 licenses for 1,000 households. That would give us approximately 89. We rounded up to 100. At our last work session, there was a general feel that number would be too low, or at least that was the perception I took from that meeting. I really wanted to drill down and see where the council may want to see that number moving forward. So again, some of the information that I think might be useful is if we were to look at our housing stock, according to the 2020 census, Orem City had 29,295 short-term rentals, or 1 per 100 households. If we were to look at the number and scrape the number completely, the data off the internet as to how many short-term rental operations are currently out there and actively advertising on Airbnb and VRBO, we would approximate that number to be somewhere in the area of 250. So that kind of gives you some information as to what is currently out there. And, if you were to take a 1% of the housing population, or sorry, not population, but housing inventory, So not as,
Housing, we're talking any door that has a.
so I believe that is how the census works, is any apartment, any condo, any townhome, any address, any particular individual address. So with that said, are there thoughts on where that numerical cap should be, or if there should be a numerical?
I just want to see some other data, but you know, I don't, this, to me, this is pretty key.
What data would be useful?
How many rentals do we have? What's our demand? What's the needed? You know, people who say I can't find a house in Orem.
Long-term rentals, then? Like how many long-term rentals? Okay.
What's the demand? And for housing in Orem? You know, I don't know if we get all data, but I'd like to kind of drill down on actual housing rates.
I think you could comparison on other cities, what they're paying for capital.
So I did, let's see if I've got. So, Provo. They don't have a numerical cap per se. Where it goes, where they do have a cap is in multifamily buildings. If it's a multifamily building, they're not allowed to have more than 10% of that multifamily building being used as a short-term rental. Sandy City allows 2 short-term rentals per every 100 single-family detached dwellings. And so, and then if you look at Logan, theirs is 2 per 1,000 population. So Logan's is approximately right now 108. So those would be 3 different examples I have for you.
Just to clarify some of those stats I'm asking for, I mean, some of these long-term rentals may be classified, maybe short-term rentals that are just classified as long-term, right?
Correct.
Because it was based on your use.
So I think they will release that, information and then some of the side work. It's hard for us to make the guess. We don't want to control rentals create an impact. A big impact on the so yes, and they go.
Yes.
Another issue. And so if we set up this structure, there's gonna be some costs involved, right? Because there's gonna be some number of generated for costs. So whatever this one thing, those costs need to be covered by the structure.
And that would be part of it. Yes.
I wouldn't want the number set any less than what we think are current. I think that's just a fact. So I think the 1%.
That's a good starting point.
And I do agree with something that the owners have said to you earlier, is they only keep their property nicer than the guy who's renting it. Because every 3 days they get a review and they need positive reviews and they need to have nice pictures and stuff. So I think they'll keep it up nicer than some of the renters. I can go with that and talk about it.
Yeah, I think the whole bill is.
I think the density thing is like, is a wise solution or something like that. Yeah,
Dispersed and not.
so one area is not going in that. Other lack of connectivity.
Another kind of counterpoint to that, I was reading in someone who was telling about, they had someone, you know, by a period of time, that this man became a student from China, having experienced it in the United States of America, specifically one in Utah, you don't get anywhere else. And so I think there are some benefits to that as well, and I think people come here for a little bit of show with, you know, this year farmers market to see some of the class to, you know, participate in some. So I just, no. Yeah, so homeowner
I think
occupied.
that's the difference, right? That's why we have two options. Moving forward, and I think, to your point, Tom, you mentioned you wanted to cap it at 295, and that's the cap.
No, just the 1% of households.
Right, that's,
Yeah,
yeah, and you can't go above it, 'cause that's the cap. Right? We're at 250 now, we think.
Yeah.
But then there's people, assuming we can get maybe better numbers.
it'd be interesting.
As we work with
Buying a
different-
piece of real estate, I gotta find, to use as an Airbnb. I gotta find out how many are in the city before I close the deal. That would be,
Well, it's an investment.
yeah, but how do you find that? It's tough to find that. It's about,
We have.
or if they're all licensed.
We have system.
You're right. That's right.
Well, we can only put it in written. Okay, if you're an investor, and you're basically investing in something, you have no idea what the rules are.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not. I mean, so the investor is not this fully quantified salary to do it.
Well, I think similar to when we have for our rentals, you know, we have a business license. If they apply for it, so you know, legal contract people are. I think that would be helpful here, it's not a large amount. Business owner, it's a small amount, it can be an investment. But it's very helpful for us to know who the owner is, where they are. And if there's a problem, how do we get in touch with someone? Whether it's a medical emergency or you know, got a party going on and it's, you know, something.
Along with that, they're out of state, we can local there.
Folks. The property.
Yeah, same there.
The last, I mean, the last area that I would like to address is just, is there any appetite if the number was to go below the 1%?
I like where we are at 250, right? I've heard a lot of complaints about some of it, so I'd like to go slow and see where we are. Those complaints, let's see if we can get those resolve themselves, that would be fantastic. But those people could still maintain their STR, you know, their short-term rentals and figure out how to run it under our guardrails. And then if everybody's happy, we can then look into expanding opportunities there. I'm not against that, but I agree with the slow rollout.
You start high and then. You start low.
I'm comfy with this, 250 to 1%. But
Okay. The last, I'll just pivot real quick to one question that, because it's been brought up a couple times. Is there any appetite for me to look at developing something that is owner occupied and non-owner occupied? A tiered system. Is there any appetite for the council to see something like that?
my knee-jerk reaction to that is I would love to see something. I feel like there's such an added benefit to having owner occupied. So
I think
and maybe they get a little bit of a additional benefit for being there. On this versus somebody who's out of state. I think that's, I like that.
I think that's good.
Okay.
Well, you talked about the schools, the distance proximity for, so we don't have sex offenders do violations and things like that. Right?
Yes, so that is going in our new version of the draft is there will be a proximity restriction to primary schools, so elementary and junior high.
Yeah, thanks for doing this.
Welcome. With that direction, I think it was very, very helpful to me. With that direction, I'll come back at a future work session and we'll talk through a couple more of the issues. And then hopefully we can get quickly to having a draft that we can put before the council floor. Okay. Thank you.
My Orem and the Orem program. Very.
Okay, we'll skip the slides then. Yes, so just really quickly, if you recall, a couple months ago, we talked about boards and commissions and made some changes to code. And we talked about the website and there were a lot of great suggestions that came from you as council members. That the boards and commissions site that we used to have was really clunky. It was difficult as a council member to see what the components were or how long they've been in office. And so, our development team, our software development team took those suggestions and has created a site, and then we'll show you really quickly in the citizen portal. Yes. With that, okay.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you all for having me. As a quick refresher, I know most of you are well familiar with this website. Here's the old one. If I'm a citizen wanting to apply, I have to fill out this lengthy form, go through a few things and then say acknowledge, and then that goes off to our boards and commissions internal site, which up to this point is the exact same site. As an employee, I would click the staff login, and that would be that. The way that we've rewritten it is there are now two separate sites entirely, so that anything that the citizens interact with can be isolated. They do their thing. And then those of us that use the admin tools, which would be most of you, have your own login that will be living in the employee portal that you currently use. What you're looking at right now is the citizen-facing side of this. They can see clearly what is available to them, as well as, and these have yet to be filled out, but descriptions about every single one of these. So they know what they're signing up for before they actually go and click the button. Something that is nice about this, though, is that we are implementing a new login scheme for all of our citizens. I'll talk a little bit more about why we're going that direction in a minute. But what this means is that the application process is very streamlined. You don't have to fill out your personal information because that's already been filled out. We already know who you are, and we can verify that you are a citizen of Orem before you even get to this step. Okay. Yes.
The second item on the list is overseas. But what's your time frame for putting the numbers about this?
So
what if you just want to?
This is live data.
These are
Yeah, this is live right now. So these are according to.
So what my question is, let's say I'm the wants to wear, commission on, and it's a zero seats out there. That's not like discouraged. Whereas the way it works right now is people go on there and they do a queue. And so even though there's zero open seats, there's still more than 40 chances to go outside. They don't know if they can help too much as whatever.
So maybe just something at the top that says, even though there may not be an open seat, you can be able to
Consider it.
yeah, to be considered when.
Couldn't you just say next open seat is this date?
Just
the top.
and, encourage people to sign up and get them on there. This is kind of dynamic.
What do you think? Nicole?
Absolutely, that is something that we can do. And that actually leads us to one of our design philosophies that we've been approaching as a team, which is making sure that a lot of these changes can be easily done by the people that use this application. So for example, Teresa is an admin over a lot of these items. She would be able to go in and actually make these changes herself without requiring additional resources from the software development team to make these kinds of changes. So we are thinking about those types of things already. So a change like this would be very well within the realm of possibility to do very quickly. Something that was requested in this new rewrite was a requirement to upload a resume. For now, you are not able to submit unless you have a resume that you upload in PDF form. We also have certain acknowledgements that you have to read, as well as the ability to opt into receiving communications and notifications from the city.
So are you therefore requiring like a cell number, like required fields?
Yes,
Because I have had that.
yes, and that will happen. That is forced upon you when you sign up for an account in general. Yeah, you can't skirt those requirements in order to be validated as a citizen. Now,
You can't apply for a board or commission without being.
right, exactly.
We also have. I think part of our, I think this is all I asked people, is probably like these things that we do. But I think part of our, what we're trying to accomplish here is we find that feel broader than that, but people who are even aware of this, they're running.
Then if we have some customizations, like my neighborhood commission, we got people certain areas. Put a map in there and say which area you live in.
Yeah, we can definitely field those requests and spit those out to make sure that we can.
That's the best part about having software developed. Because if we were to do this out of house, we would never be able to say, yes, we can work on that. We could definitely have that.
Yeah,
Like, I don't think that's.
Right, these are things that we can actively scope out for sure. What you're looking at right now is the internal application. Now, this might look almost exactly the same. You'll notice that there's this board over here. This is the directory, very similar to what you would have seen if you had logged into the previous site. The difference here is that if I click on this, I have an admin view into this. So I can look.
Or your reporting.
Right. So you'll be able to see who is assigned to it, what members they are, how long they've been serving, any representatives, staff, etc., that are associated with this, as well as quickly able to see any applicants that currently exist for this board or commission. I will note that these all say one term. Just about everything is going to say one term right now because we weren't keeping records of that information until very recently. So while this information might not be completely accurate as of today, as we continue to use this, because we are tracking that information, it will be more accurate as time goes on. So we will have an accurate representation of how long somebody's been serving in a given capacity as we continue to use this.
What's that somewhere? There was a spreadsheet or something. Lisa, do you know if we have a spreadsheet that shows how many terms people have been on the board or commission?
We don't, because it was kept individually by the different commissions and not by the.
So it's possibly we might be able to get to the staff report that we for the commission and both those. So we'll work on our end to try and update that as much as possible.
Yeah. The data that you're seeing is data that we are storing internally inside of our database. So this isn't dependent on a Google sheet or some Excel sheet that's keeping track of that. This is stuff that we are keeping track of. Now we can take that data and put it into our database. But what this allows us to do is get away from those types of things and just get you the information that you want readily available to you.
But we used to track that on a Google sheet, like you say, it was external from this.
I wonder why that is.
I don't want to stop doing.
No, I saw
It's
it.
been maybe a few years.
It might be interesting stuff.
Let's try and find it, but I would think that the staff report or over the board commission.
So these are the major updates that we have to boards and commissions. We were able to get this rewrite done in about 1 month from when it was requested. What you're seeing is going to be going live tomorrow. This is going to be in the hands of the citizens. And in your hands as well. You will be able to access this application through your a plug for my team. They've done an excellent job. Previously, something like this would have taken 4 to 5 minutes to do a full rewrite. But between how we are now structuring our project management, as well as leveraging various tools available to us, such as AI, we've been able to expedite a lot of our development. So.
And since the request came from the meeting, and also as opposed to this meeting. Oh, that perfect sense now.
We make sure to hit the ground running whenever we're given something. So,
Okay, we know we only have 1 minute left, but we want to show you really quickly, we are working on a new citizen portal. Where it's a one-stop shop for your utilities, for signing up for recreation for your family, all those things. We will have this new site. This is just the framework of it, and he's gonna go through it. We decided we want to call it My One. So, open to any suggestions that we kind of.
mhm.
Will it be, Spanish as well?
That is something that we need to scope out to add to it. Initially English, but we can definitely. Benefits of having an in-house development team to get these requests, we can scope them out and we can tackle them. The idea behind this is that right now we have a bunch of different applications that serve our citizens. So our utility billing is a completely unique application that is disconnected from our fitness center application. We're a unique login events. I go to one, I have to remember my login for the other one as well. Or if I don't, then we are encouraging our citizens to engage in bad practices of having the same password and the same login information for different sites. We are trying to avoid that. And so as such, we are unifying all of these accounts into one using Azure, which we are currently using internally for all of our systems, but we are taking that capability to our citizens as well, and anybody who wants to do business. What that means is that when I go into my Orem, if I need to sign up for a business license, which is, I think, it stays within the application itself. It still knows who I am. I don't have to re-sign in, I don't have to re-authenticate, but I can still continue to do my business. And then if I want to, I can go back to another application. The plan for this right now is when we launch my Orem, which will be at the end of the year, we will launch with business licensing and utility billing as the first two applications. Currently, we are writing business licensing. And then other applications will follow. We will continue over time to integrate more applications into this so that we are bringing them up to security standards as well as code readability standards. And hopefully we get a unified front that we can present to our citizens where they are easily able to interact with all these various functions that we provide as a city. The main thing that I do want to highlight with this is a wallet system. So payment is another thing where we ensure PCI compliance by doing this new method through PayJunction, where we can store this data, but we aren't actually holding on to the data itself. We are letting a third party handle the security of that. That allows us to use this payment data in any application that we want to integrate into my own, so that they only have time to get their payment information once if they share certain things. Any questions?
I'll be having quiet, like the other commissions, to really get it, so it's well, it's new, we should have an ongoing also, so maybe we have like aim put up people know the user out there and we'll allow it. It's a use,
Yeah, it'll be similar to our Citizen Connect campaign where we do something every month to let people know.
Good job.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Under time, the budget, I mean, it's faster.
We were built first, right?
Okay. Next up, we got 2.4. Okay.
Numbers. Let's at least give up planning commission then we have here.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we learned some fun things last time. You can only have 4 mics on at a time. Mayor, you will enjoy the mute button right in front of your.
If you raise your voice, it mutes you. If you raise your voice very hard, you can't.
For this one,
It will. It's very nice. I kept getting accused of using it because the mics kept going out. I'm like, I'm not touching.
our next step will be like.
Yeah, a little trap door under. That's what we had in the previous place. My feet kept falling in the hole in the floor underneath it. It's made feet, so anyway.
You can turn it down, it's over here.
That was fast.
Thank you. So we got here, item 2.4, joint planning commission, city council session. And Jerry, if you'd like to. Yes.
Great, thank you, Mayor. We have a joint session of the planning commission council meeting behind this meeting. It is not to talk about individual projects or anything like that, but to talk at a higher level about issues or concerns that the council may have, the planning commission may have in the city that need to be looked at and addressed. Right now, we're going through our general plan update. The planning commission's been working on that. They're working on and looking at aspects, and things are coming to them about what should we focus on. What are the big picture issues that should be addressed? We also have the heart of downtown project that's happening, and our consultant will be coming back will be joining us by Zoom at a council work meeting here in the near future to talk about where we are and give you an update. We don't have a draft report back yet, but they've been doing some good work, and we've been working with them and meeting with them every couple of weeks. We're having meetings, getting that information. So that's the intent of this meeting. And I know, Dave, you are the chair or liaison to the planning commission council, and Madeline is our council or planning commission chair. And so, Dave, anything you'd like to add, or Madeline, or the purpose of this meeting? Well, I think it's just maybe on the same page and get to know the people out on the planning commission and come together as a move forward.
And likewise, I feel like we've not had a lot of interaction, and we are starting to look at some of these bigger picture issues in the city. It's been really informative as we started to dig into our current general plan and what's there and what's not there, and start asking questions and what we're finding. That has been really, I think my fellow commissioners would agree, it's been eye-opening as to some areas where we could maybe be more creative and look at planning and how that could develop our city in certain ways, how we can look at some of our code, how we are making decisions. I think we're starting to get some indication that we don't always have all the information that we need to be making recommendations to you all. And part of that is having some feel for what your vision is for the city, what we want to see in Orem.
And as staff, our goal is to be able to give to the council and to the planning commission the best information we can, so that you have all the facts in front of you, so that you'll be able to make decisions. And as we have projects come in and respond to them, but also as we're doing planning through the general plan and other things, it's helpful for us to know what's a high priority to look at. We have limited time, money, and resources, and we want to know where we should apply the planners to study things, think about things. You saw earlier talking about short-term rentals. Boy, what a big topic and an important topic to go down, and lots of nuance with that. There's a lot of planning topics that deal with that. And how
which are the more important ones? How can we prioritize these things? So this is intended to be really kind of an open discussion that we can have here and see if we can, through this meeting, come up with certain ideas or principles that we can either be guided by, or topics or areas that we can focus on as we go forward in the planning department.
And I want to use one of your analogies. You've given us an analogy about the general plan that has really kind of helped me as we've worked on this, which is, as we work on the general plan, we're creating the skeleton. We're creating the base structure for what we want to see in the city, what we want to see going forward. And then it's going to take us time after we do this process to flesh it out, to put the muscle on, find all the rest of it, to make it work. And I think that thinking of it, that structure, that what are the goals? What are the basic things that we want to see? Where do we want to focus time next year or the year after as well in terms of development? Because as we say, we're finding a lot of things that we can't address as we sit here and work through each section of general plan.
You want to get done the timeline of where we're at in general plan. It's a good long process.
Yeah, we could have Jared. Jared's the lead process.
I just want to say something about as far as the thermal plant. I was really impressed with the way the planning commission went through because I mean the normal process is just give them, math, road, this, that. You guys kind of took it to the next level. You looked at if we make these different changes in the transportation plan, how does that make us more friendly to USA, or does it make us working to USA? And there were structures where if we did it a certain way, we might have to always thoroughfares going to our neighborhood, or what the areas they should be. But by digging deep and really getting into it, I did a great job of coming up with something that will positively impact the neighborhoods. So my hope is that if you go through the general plan, doing that same process, what are our grounding foundational things that we're trying to accomplish? And you're kind of the boots on the ground that are the first step in helping that happen.
Because we really are at a crossroads here in Orem, right? We've talked about this. Renewal, revitalization, that's where we are. We built out. So what's our focus now? How do we achieve that goal? And to the mayor's point, from the transportation standpoint, I've gone to some of the meetings, the MAG meetings, where they talk about transportation, and it's just so wonderful to see that they're no longer relying on Orem to funnel all the cars east and west, that they're looking for other options on the interstate to help dissipate the traffic. So I feel that message was well received at first, maybe not so much at first, but to this point, to the point now, well received and understood. And I credit that to you guys and the time that you put in to really go through that with the fine-tooth comb and from the perspective of our neighborhoods and protecting them. So yeah, I just want to echo thank you, and I'm really looking forward to your input on the options.
Hey, let me give you kind of a rundown on where we are in the timeline. So right now, the plan, we're a little bit behind on our land use elements because it's taken longer as we've identified problems and issues. So we're still finalizing the land use element, which is we knew would be the biggest one, and that's what we started with it. So we continue that this coming meeting in May, and we're starting the redevelopment section. Start talking about that. Matt, and Taylor's working on that section for us right now, and gonna put us through some cases about what we want to see with redevelopment. We're slated to come to the council sometime after the talk about redevelopment, so we're looking for a little time on a work session to update on what they've done so far. And then we move on to economics by the beginning of June, transportation in June, water, and then we need to update the council. That should put us in July. Housing needs to start by then because we need to coincide with our moderate income housing plan that needs to be updated as well. Then parks and recreation, public services, and urban design. We're going to be doubled up on some of our work sessions, but we're lighter on our regular sessions. So what we did last week, for example, we had our work session for an hour, went into the regular meeting, and then went right back into work session. So we need to do that.
pretty much all summer long. We want to update you guys, during the end of June, beginning of July again, and then again in August, before we go to final draft. So we're slipping behind a little bit, but we're still hopeful that we can make final drafts in September. So that we adopted that. Or else review for that. You never know how adoption goes. But as we make adjustments, we want to make sure that you're definitely, we have those 3 times. We should be showing you the updates of where we are 3 times between now and like 12.
Let me say, just as a planning commission member, how impressed I am with the people we work with at the city. These guys are just fabulous, and the people that support them just do a remarkable job. I don't think you could find a more capable, dedicated person than our chair. Madeline is very, very competent, takes it very seriously what she does. And we couldn't do better as a city than to have Madeline as our chairperson. She's just great.
You mentioned that there were some things that were surprising, whatever. We'd love to hear about that. If that's.
It would be great if you go into the meeting.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know for me, like, because it came out of conversations with a question I asked, we're doing land use right now, and this came up, I think the last time I was before you all, also, like, what are the definitions of some of these words, like, what? And it's different for residential and it's different for commercial. What is high density, what's medium density, what's low density, what are these things? And as we started digging in, we're finding that because there's 2 maps, there's the projected map that we have that's part of our general plan. And it says this is kind of the general idea of what we want where, and then we have our actual zoning. And there's differences between the 2, which isn't odd, but there's specifics that we've been trying to get information about. Like I asked, like, well, what is the density of the neighborhoods in Orem? And we know that they're zoned R8, but we know a lot of those neighborhoods are not R8. A lot of them are 6.5 or 7.5 because of the different times they've grown up. And so we don't actually know what the density of a lot of our neighborhoods are. And I think there's a lot of information that we could glean. I think there's better decisions we could be making if we knew that, and we could understand kind of how Orem is. And along with that is things like, where are historical neighborhoods? We don't have anything directly that says this is a historical neighborhood. That I think preserving historical neighborhoods have to be a part of that. That's part of the conversations we've been having.
You said something that's surprising. We have places that are zoned R8, but they're only 6,000 or 7,000 square foot lots. And I guess, we can blame for finding people who work here. How does that happen? How do we have an R8 that isn't an R8? I guess I'm going to continue by that.
But things like that happen frequently in planning. Something will be about 30, 40 years ago, and the law will be one scheme set. And then as times change, things will change. And you'll just come in and frequently you'll rezone the area. It's R8.
But they didn't really look at what was really built there.
Yeah.
Everybody saying.
And this is a corollary to what Madeline was saying. One thing I've been thinking about and wondering how much time and effort we should put into is a housing type study to have us really come in and dig into all of Orem, all the neighborhoods, and look at all the uses, especially housing. And really go in, so we know in this neighborhood, there are X number of units, and they are single family home or attached homes, or what the breakout is.
Ashton's on less concerned. But if we zone something R8 now, and first people start building, I think we have checks and balances in place to make sure they have 8,000 square feet.
Yes, we do, and I'm not concerned about that. I am concerned about knowing what we actually have, the snapshot on the ground today as we make decisions into the future.
Because when we see the flat map like you guys do, it says 8,320 and 8,412, and I'm hoping those are real.
So yeah, so there's no concern about what's coming. Historical, what that, it adds to confusion when people try to come and build, I'm like, hey, I'm right next to 6.5, give me a variance.
Yeah, yep.
Give me a change. Why would you do it? The whole neighborhood has been like that, and then we get in the position of, well, they're not wrong, the same, there is a lack of data.
Well, one lot's
In the
left
city.
in that neighborhood, and I go to build on it, and these guys tell me that's not 8,000 square feet, it's only 7,200. And so I have to ask for a variance, right?
Usually that would be a non-living lot.
Okay.
Yeah, probably they would be okay. That's different.
Well, what happens when they sell it?
But
Same legal.
it's only if they try to subdivide it into small lots, that's
Okay.
where they run into problems.
And we've seen it like with flag lots. Those have come before us,
Yeah.
where somebody was a flag lot in a 6.5 neighborhood, but they had to meet the R8 like designation, which makes for a much bigger area in the backyard. They'd have to, just as an example, but and things like that do happen.
Thank you
Yeah.
for that insight.
And that you just brought up something that, something I wanted to address with you folks is, the flag lots. I would like to see that looked at very closely because this, having different setbacks for a flag lot, you know, we don't have the same protections as the single. It's like within PRDs.
Small ones, single unit PRDs.
Yeah, so anyway, sounds like you're on topic.
No, but I think that also leads to something else is that I think there's a lot about our code that needs to be updated. I think we need to look at and say, what is this? I mean, shifting from residential to commercial, we basically, I know there's a few exceptions, but we basically have two main commercial zones and they're almost identical if you go through the uses. And I think that that is one of those places where going forward, I think there needs to be further discussion. And we've talked a lot about this. This is what we spent a lot of time last week on, is what kind of other designations are there? Are there other types of retail we want? What do we want to attract? What kind of commercial? Where does the commercial belong? State Street's 5 miles long. Should there be one designation for the entire thing, or should that be broken up? Same for University Parkway, Geneva, we were kind of identifying some big things. We've talked about some alternative ideas looking in neighborhoods at some of our cross streets, like 4th North and 8th West. There's like pocket community where you've just a little bit of retail right there along those roads. Are there other places in Orem that might be useful? Who wouldn't want to have a little cafe or a small?
If we're advocating people walking out of the house to get stuff, we need to look at those areas. We also talked about detached ADUs as a possibility, or smaller lots for tiny homes. There's a lot of different things coming in, but we have been working together on this for a while, and we've lacked. Until, by the way, I have to give credit to Derek, because up until him, and I've been here for over 5 years, I have not been able to get information from anybody. So now I get easy access to information has been fantastic with them, asking for maps. I asked for maps before, never got printed. It's almost like the gatekeeping was so hard. So then we couldn't see through the veil. And what everything has been transparent, right to the point, ready the next time. And when we show up, we have the maps we requested. It gave us a way to see what the city wants, where the city wants to go. And we've just, one of the things we want to do is, I know we're the planning commission, I would like to get suggestions on what your vision is. What is your vision? What does that look like? When we're big advocates on private property rights. And keeping the city as a family singular city. Having the neighborhoods to be, anything comes in, have to be in line with the same existing neighborhood. Having access to all services to go to each neighborhood, fire, police, you have to have easy access. And we fought a big fight with that on the 1200 North property where they wanted to go over a few hundred units, where that would have been difficult for the fire department to go through. So what is your vision? We're currently talking about the legal non-conforming issue for commercial properties, which is what I faced. Is what caused me to take all my businesses outside of Orem. All my 3 commercial property, and my businesses. Sold everything, went out, because at the time the law was completely prohibitive to my growth. Now it's not. It took a couple of years. So that's, we want to protect any zone changes. We want to make sure that the previous mom and pop owner can get loans without having to worry about being non-conforming. So we're working on that, or can sell to somebody else. So also the new plan that came in, it gave me a little bit of PTSD from the old State Street master plan. It looks like somebody copied and pasted and passed it through. So now we're going through the old fine tooth comb because it still advocates of taking properties out of landowners on State Street to make things bigger. That's not what we want as a city. That's not what I fought for when we had that issue. So what is your vision? Can we align in that vision so we don't have those instances where we don't know why these guys vote 7-0 on everything? That's not true. We listen to the citizens on everything. We extend the times, we listen to them. We want to see what we follow the existing ordinances when we do so. So we want to have alignment that shows, because the power of everybody aligned on the same thing will advance things so much faster. We're currently, there's a push and pull unnecessarily, and now the data is not an issue, which is great, but we do lack a lot of data, just like she said. I can give you all information, but the data is, the information is not necessarily the data we're looking at, right?
One thing that, is, on this, is like the historic preservation. Apparently, they're doing a survey.
Right.
With some of the historic.
Some grant, so they'll have a company do all that, we have the information, so we just need to tap into that. Yeah, that would be fantastic to look through as we go through.
And we've expressed a desire to have the historic preservation, the public utilities, Parks and Rec, when we get to there, have those commissions come and meet with us so that we can get a better idea.
So another, just a simple question, but what designates a historic area?
You have to tell us.
That's a question. Yeah, so it's usually it's a designation of time that was been in place and coastal or areas.
So it's not just, it's been there for X amount of years.
That's one of the elements, but there's also some other reasons.
Has to do when Chris was born.
Oh, yeah.
Anything before that's historic, right?
That means I'm historic.
Is that his?
Well, there's
Historic
historic
or-
and there's prehistoric, right?
Prehistoric, that's me, prehistoric.
And the survey Chris is talking about will go into an area and look at all of these homes. And this whole area may be of historic significance. Now, having said that, there may be individual structures that are landmarks or historic that we can honor and preserve and do things with.
That unlocks the door for them, for the homeowners and others that live in those kinds of residents to get grants and repair and fix up their, restore their homes with grant and some limits.
We have a number of those in the city currently.
Yeah, they're always looking for opportunities to get more money.
Yeah.
And those who apply first usually get it. And so we've been always on one of the forefronts of asking on questions. So this one was on the cusp of doing good things like that.
Yeah, no, let me just say something about that. It's a historic in the north and one thing that we've talked a lot about, if you ask us, that's going forward. We're back into this, but so we were getting a lot of push from the state to do like this, to do all the west side. They would have money available if we were to do this, and they have the funds available. And I've been talking with them a lot lately about Orem's legacy city. And as such, you've got areas in our city that are older. That can be some areas that are run down.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that's really important to us and what I'm talking to the state about is these funds that we've got. Let's have some of those funds and use those to renew certain areas of our city. And so there are ways to think of if you've got areas that will run down and can use some help. How would we do that?
We can designate them a certain area based on age and ability. And I run into that a lot in the state of Connecticut. So most of our contracts will work in the state of Connecticut, will run into use historic home. Because if we came to the point it's prohibitive, it didn't work there. So we want to balance
Yeah, you want to
Want to balance it, because for us, in order to do a commercial contract, we'd be waiting a year to 3 years to get it just past the circle committee that we can touch it. But we want to balance the idea of what's, and sometimes it never works out.
Yeah, but it is important to look at the big picture, and even as you guys are doing your, going through things, are there areas we should be like considering designating as renewal areas that could be, quick stuff? Because if you do it on a bigger macro picture, you can there's 4 acres in an area and 6 acres in an area, and that area can be revitalized. And in a way that there are models where you do put a smaller homes, the whole community feel to it.
Is that only available for residential, or could it be commercial as well?
This is mainly residential.
Residential only, so we cannot designate State Street as a historic.
No, there are ways, that's a different, that's a different aspect.
Yeah.
But yeah, but that goes back to the same information questions we were having, because that's where some of my questions started coming out, and then some of the kind of discussion was that, but we don't know where those neighborhoods are. Like, we can't quickly look at a map and say, this neighborhood was built, this was a Genevan steel neighborhood that was built in the 1940s or 50s, and it's the character of this neighborhood, and that's what we want to preserve. So it's getting that information, working towards that. Right now, we're really just in an identification phase, but we totally agree and hear with what you're saying.
And this is the one thing I'm interested in doing since I've come here is a housing study and use study, because it would help us identify that exact issue. How old, what's the average size, when they were built, all of those things help us identify and focus. CDBG funding, other types of grants and things that are out there and then we can look at economic grants also, facade grants for businesses and things like that, and target specific areas to help them. I don't like the approach of just regulating everything. I like to give incentives to help people stay and improve.
That's what we talked a lot about with commercial in our last meeting. We were like, okay, what opportunities, what could we do? What could the city provide? Is it worth a tax break to be able to do this? That's outside of our purview, but we're saying like, just kind of to start generating ideas to set as goals is looking at how to revitalize State Street.
And that's really our master.
Yes.
Revitalizing and State Street.
And I want to give a quick
State Street in the next slide.
A quick background on State Street, and I'm sure most of you are aware, but the old way of trying to get State Street to look better and advanced was economically prohibitive to landowners, where the code was put in a way if you need to make a change over 10% of something certain, you have to bring it up to code. And bringing up to code is a great word if it meant electrical and lighting, but bringing up to code was literally demolishing, put it on State Street. That's what I fixed. My lot on 942 North State, where there's a car lot. The building was in the back. I wanted to make an addition to it. And the addition dictated me, I have to demolish it, put it in the front, and my car lot in the back. That's how the code was written. And when I sold the property in 742 to somebody else and they tried to put a shed, it was told to do the code, and these guys chose to take their business to American folk. They sold it and they took it to American folk. A developer, by the way, that knew about the existing this, came and negotiated in a way that was advantageous to him. He still owns it, waiting for it to be high density. The way the old code was put together, it was guardrailing people to arrive to a certain conclusion and a certain use. And that sparked issues where we now don't have that problem, but we also don't have a plan. You see? So how can we do both? We'd love to have a plan, but without stepping on all those business owners and telling them, like, I'm sorry, $2 million property, you paid now $4.5 million in debt. And by the way, it's only worth $3 million. That's what happened. So that's the background. So when we talk about our passion on State Street and oh my gosh, this is the same exact design and we have to get 15 more feet. It's not because we don't want the advancement. We just really want to find the balance between protecting private property rights and making State Street look amazing. So whatever we need to do, we'll come to a conclusion, but maybe more meetings, maybe more understanding, data. That's just a little background on State Street. So yeah, I love the idea of designating older neighborhood to receive grants. And as far as State Street, I think most business owners will be willing to take a seat base if you need to renew something in addition to what the city can do for them.
And to your point, that since we voted down that got rid of the State Street Master Plan as a council 3.5 years ago, it has, you could tell that there were businesses who wanted to remodel and revitalize and weren't able to that 2017 to 2022, right? That 5 years. And honestly, we've seen all of it, you know, the swim school, that there's so many storefronts that have been redone just in the past 3.5 years. It's just.
And they wouldn't have been able to.
They wouldn't have been able to, right? Yeah, so, but I appreciate your point that let's go to the next level.
So what's your vision?
So I want connectivity between the businesses. I think what makes the BRT work on University Parkway is you have connectivity between the parking lots. Everybody talk about ugly parking lots all they want, but they provide, commercial is not going to go away from the parking lots, right? So, yeah, so I can turn at the Verizon store, whatever that is, Xfinity. I can turn there and I can access all of those businesses in that parking lot. I don't have to worry about quick getting off State Street. So my push has been when I've talked to Mag and people like that, I'm like, would you get on board and start negotiating those, I don't even know what you call them, right of way, what's the
Cross access.
cross access, you know, if we can get that step forward and we have more connectivity between businesses, maybe that would then help create more of an opportunity for renewal in those areas and businesses helping each other.
It would. It also would help those businesses that in order to get access, you have to get back on State Street and go back in, and people will not rent there because it's hard access for money for people who don't spend their money, and that would help tremendously. In addition to that, having also, we do a lot of business in the East Coast, and they have lots of medians and lots of U-turns. And in order to get somewhere just across next door, you have to go so far and come back around, which hurts the businesses. Is there a way we can address that? Because I noticed we're putting more medians in Orem. In 800 North now, the left turn is no longer right away. They have to wait for it, which adds more to the traffic. I don't know when is that changes recently in a month or so. Can we address that? Is that something under our purview for?
Well, if you're
medians and
yeah, if you're talking State Street, long term, UDOT does have plans for medians on State Street. And part of that would come up in our transportation master plan. And they try to be, even though it's a state facility, they try to be very responsive to what we provide. And so as we come in our next round of transportation master plan, that's one of the things that we should do before we begin the plan, is often the plan. So just among us, no transportation engineers. The plan sometimes will come from a desire of, oh, we need to look at this as a region, which we do. We need to look at it regionally. We also need to look at it as what's best for our residents, what's best for our quality of life. And come in and set those kind of ideas or principles about how we want transportation to function in Orem to serve our big priorities. So what are they? From what I'm hearing from the council and the planning commission over the couple of years I've been here is number one, quality of life for existing residents. Number two, how do we create good and easy access and for commercial facilities to help people come in and do those things. And so we build it from that premise rather than how do we get professors who teach at BYU but live in Lehigh as quickly to campus and out as possible. That should fall down the priority list for us as a community, in my estimation.
You left out, Gary, how responsible we should be to providing additional housing. As pointed out, pretty landlocked, how do we do that? And I don't know how high of a priority that should be. I like your first two priorities, looking at homeowners and transportation within that. The people from Lehigh are going to come through I go to BYU or wherever they're going, right, so. They're gonna happen whether it's a priority or not, so I don't know how much of a priority new housing should be. And how often, how we handle. No matter what.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And
Get a
as,
problem exit.
Yeah, I agree with that, that's it, you're right, there should be one at 800 North in Provo, I agree with that.
yeah, and Provo's worked for years. I worked for years on, an exit at 820. And if you
Yes.
look at IHC, what they're doing at the hospital there,
They want that.
they want that also. But we also want to have traffic through, because traffic, you know, I'll tell you a quick story. Provo was so jealous when In-N-Out Burger came. And we brought in a vice president from In-N-Out Burger, put him in a plane, flew around the valley, and said, wow, you know, so you want to put a In-N-Out Burger in Provo, look at this great community you have. Pitched all that stuff, and he said, you've got a great community, I see why you're so proud of your community, let me tell you how it works. As soon as you have X number of vehicle traffic passing that location, I'm calling you, put it in an hour. So we do want to balance quality of life with facilitating.
We could have had a Canes, we could have got the Canes instead of Provo. But
I want to address
made
Tom.
the decision not to put it in a certain location in Orem, they wanted housing there instead.
But I do want to address Tom's question. So Tom, would you repeat your question? Priorities for how responsible we are as a city for the national?
I think current residents have to be number one.
Mhm.
I think getting them around has to be number one. We can't ignore the fact that the knee-high guys are coming through here.
Yeah.
And then, what do we do with, people who want to build, how do we help?
Like developers, you mean, with.
People who want to build, people to live in. right?
Well, I think we've been through a lot of that in the last few months with developers coming in, trying to add homes to the community, but it was not in line with the neighborhood style. And all the developers so far have come to the conclusion, every single one of them, that it does pencil at the current zoning. And they all did.
And to
They all did. So,
David's point, when Canyon Park was gonna be developed, he said, hey, R8's a gold standard, and they adjusted to it.
but however, how many times they showed up trying
Oh,
something
yeah,
different?
I know.
And they tried so many different tactics, and if I didn't have the historical experience of that exact property and how much they're trying to rent it for in order not to get rented, to keep it empty and private, you can't rent it. I told them, I'll rent the entire building to you for my business from them
Yeah,
at the existing Orem rate.
yeah.
Like, oh, we can't do that. Like, well, that solves your problem. I'll rent the whole building. So and if you see how much they rent M for versus what Q was for, again, what happened was supposed to be happening, we need the homes there, they are able, great. But every single time the council, the planning commission said that is not in line with this vision of the city is, they raised so many flags, but at the end, they always came back every single time. It penciled at the existing code. Every single, not once they said, like, oh, we're not gonna build here. It's over. Not once.
And I think that comes back to the general plan as well. And what we're talking about is, what do we want? We have such limited land left. I mean, such limited, and it's in little pockets. And some of those pockets probably make sense for certain types of developments. And other parts of it probably don't, or we want to maintain that land for other uses. And I think that it kind of, going with some of the conversation we've had, that's the pivot forward we need. We need the plan. I said this one with State Street Master Plan. Hey, we've got rid of it. What are we doing now? And I think that that's what we need to get to now, is what are we doing now? What is Orem going to have going forward? What decisions? Because sometimes and I've said this before, we make decisions kind of in a vacuum. We keep getting lots of land and somebody comes and says, this is what we want to do with it. And then we have to sit there and say, okay, is that this or that? Okay, does that work with the neighborhood? But we do need to have a more general plan across Orem as to what constitutes family city listing. What is for the best interest of our citizens? What do we want to see going forward? Does this make sense for the transportation? But having those conversations before the developers come also helps the developers know what to expect as well. Because I know there's been some back and forth with that, they don't always know. Would we have more investment, certain types of investment, if it was clear what our goal was, what our desire was? Possibly. What else could we be attracting?
So for State Street, Renee's talking about, having, infrastructure and State Street. You're talking about mediums, controlling houses. Mediums. At least on our side, and so those are things that, we can be working through on State Street. Because I believe that if we can figure that out, if there's a scenario where, you can pull off State Street, I don't know if there's going to be, but this is something like that, you can pull off State Street, we can have connected areas. If that became a thing, I think investors would come in, and they would pay to take out that, build infrastructure we're talking about. What do we do by State Street and enhance, our connectivity, so, some creative thinking along those lines.
And we'll do our best and figure out how can we align the interests of the city with the investors and the citizens.
One of the,
That is the key, right? If we can create structure where investors want to come in, then that funds a lot of these changes.
some of the citizens that I speak with that know I'm on the committee, the planning committee, complain about traffic. You have to wait if you're coming south through the intersection at 800 North and State Street. They'll have to wait sometimes 2-3 lights to make it through that light at certain times of the day. And then, so there are a lot of traffic bottlenecks, increasing numbers of those. So then the idea, we need more housing. People say, well, our kids can't afford to buy housing in Orem. What can be done about that? And then you realize that at some point, you just can't do anymore. And then some people say our kids have to build a home or buy a home elsewhere, which all of my kids live outside of this area, the city of Orem. And people say, well, my kids will say, why do you stay there? Because it's getting so congested that it's hard to get around in Orem. And living here 50 years, as I have done, and things can't always be like they were 50 years ago. I well realize that, but we have to be careful. I think at some point we get to a tipping point where we can't really go back and fix things. So some of these open areas that are under consideration for development, I think we have to be very careful not to make them so they're points of congestion. I just say that for what it's worth.
To Glenn's point, I have people that will not move to Orem because traffic, and we haven't added any more housing yet. They just will not move to Orem. From the city that everybody wanted to move to, like my neighborhood is in the northeast corner where lots of people want to live by that place, by the canyon. They just won't. The homes there have been for sale for so long. It has nothing to do with the pipe project that's about to go in. They have been for sale for much longer than that. And each person that comes in, they're sophisticated. They look at the neighborhood, they look at the school, they look at the traffic, and they decide not to. In addition to that, this is a little side quest here, the 1560 to 1550 East intersection that keeps getting an accident to a week. One of my neighbors almost died last week. My other neighbor was disabled because of it. A third person just got wrecked there.
Because of the diversion from the water project.
No, the water project diversion hasn't happened yet.
The road right before the.
Right by Wilson stop.
Yeah,
8 North and 15.
But there's a lot more, they're diverting them that way though, too, right? That is towards up that road.
Yeah, they haven't tore it up yet.
It's just been dangerous forever.
Again, that's a side quest, sorry to throw it in there, but it's worth mentioning for the accident that happened in that intersection. So but people are not moving to Orem. You guys will start viewing. People are not coming to Orem because of the traffic. Whether we like it or not, the existing infrastructure does not support tons more people. And whoever can come in, and quite frankly, I want to live in Beverly Hills, can't afford it. I'm gonna live somewhere else in LA. It's just how it works. It's just how it works. You can't afford it, don't live here. I couldn't live in Orem, I lived in Eagle Mountain. So I had enough equity, took the down payment, lives in Orem. That's how economics work. You're not gonna bend the reality of economics so you can make affordability happen. It just doesn't work that way. Now, if you want to work, you can do like Texas, where you throw multi-level housing everywhere to the point where they go bankrupt and they become prime areas, is because the rent now is so much less than the mortgage. But that's, but you see that, but, so the inverse already happened, like that already happened in other areas. One of my great neighbors that, by the way, left Orem, went to Park City in a remote area because of the traffic. He owns land, he owns enough multifamily housing in Texas. His rent went down by $450 per unit. His occupation is now at 65% because the amount of growth and the amount of buildings on there, to the point where it now starting to be a problem area. You have to rent it so cheap. Maybe get much bigger area, not a problem area. So we have the privilege to know that data before we get it.
And I think bringing it back comes to what the mayor is saying, that is, I think if we make our general plan actually reflective of what we want to see, because currently it's not, it's just, here's some definitions and here's some things, but if we really set that out, so developers can see, this is what we're looking for, this is what we want, I think we would get those investments. I think we would find that.
We also have, here's a list of every way you can break the rule. Available. We also have, here's a list of every way you can break the rules. Here's a PD.
And that's how we need to fix them, but that's the next step.
We give them a way
That's
to break
the
all the
next
rules
step.
we're trying to build in the same exact ordinance.
Yeah.
That's
But once we have the goals, then we go through, we have to do the serious work of actually fixing the code to equal what we want. I mean, we have a lot of conversations about. Why do we have PDs? Probably because our districts don't, our actual zoning districts don't work. And so it's time to repeat.
No, I'm just saying, we go back to State Street, Master Plan, State Street, that's our economic need, right? And putting meters down and you're trying, you really need to talk to the fire in place because their response time, we're really supposed to take care of our citizens. They can't get across, they can't take their rigs across or ruin it, so if it takes you 5 more minutes, that person might be dead. So to me, that's why I'm like, we need to open it up, right? And so, but we need to bring in the police and the fire because they're the ones that live it and have to do it, right? They have to react that quickly, so they need to be on board when we talk about transportation because they live.
That's why we need connectivity.
Yeah, I mean, Hobby Lobby up to basically Pet Smart, I mean, that's, you can do the whole thing.
Yeah, that's
940.
We're also one of the most densely populated cities in the state. I don't think we want to get higher costs.
So, yeah, we're the second highest density. And it's probably, this is probably the same one.
Yeah, we really should do regulations to lower.
So if I'm understanding, I've been quiet. What I hear is that the vision of the council is the economic driver for Orem City. So I want to make sure I'm understanding this. Is going to be retail, low-end retail. Is that my understanding what the vision for Orem is? Because I haven't heard anything beyond that.
We're talking whatever is on University Parkway and State Street, that's right now, that's our economic interest.
Yeah, but that's all low-end retail. So we don't have any vision beyond that? What's that?
Yeah, industrial and mechanical,
Yeah.
all done to be the.
Yeah, but
We have medical.
Like,
yeah,
what are we doing to
medical.
attract talent? We're starting to get stuff at University Place, and I think as we talk more about economics,
And we got the light.
absolutely, we did.
Got great places.
We've got a cheesecake factory finally,
we got great places to be.
but
Which they-
it's leveraging off of those.
What I would think is the lower end retail is your foundation, your stable engine. Because while high end retail is great in a recession, it's not.
Well,
Yeah, no.
to me, that's a negative term, lower end
Yeah, it is.
retail. I think it's small business,
Small business,
right?
yeah.
Right.
That's what we have, and what makes America the small business.
Yeah, but if I were to ask you, what are the top 20 to 25 small business employers in Orem? Who are they? And what do we do to help them? I'm not.
You would ask
sure.
Captain Stack.
Actually, my conversations with her haven't been terribly fruitful, frankly. I'm just throwing that out there. My conversations with Kathy have not been. I just want to throw that out. As a planning commission member, I see that as a gap. That we could better define what we're targeting, who we want to support, how we want to support them, what types of retail. We have wonderful universities bookending Orem that could provide us all sorts of talent if we wanted to encourage entrepreneurs, like Provo does.
last 3 years, I mean, the business is well.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I'm not,
There's been 800 each year for 3 years, so there's been 2,400 new business development in the last 3 years.
yeah.
And that's.
And how many of the policies?
I'm just,
Yeah, right. And to your point, I remember when I went to the hooked up, ribbon cutting, they were like, we want to be right here by UU, right next to BYU, that's our market, right? And how many people could name that business, right? But they are thriving.
Right, they are trying.
And they started, you know, but, to your point, I get it. Yeah, let's figure out
well,
how to attract more. Let's do better.
in my spare time, I work with people who are unemployed twice a week, trying to help them find jobs. It's kind of tough right now, and I think we ought to be looking at ways of developing so that we can make sure we're all continually fully employed, our citizens, that when they're looking for a job, they can find them that match their skill set. I just think we can do a better job there personally, but that's my 2 cents.
And we have talked about within like commercial designations, do we want to look at accelerating areas? Do we want to look at incubating areas? What could we do with some of our Class B and Class C office space, which we have quite a bit of in Orem? How could we maybe leverage those, incentivize to get those to people so that they could build between BYU and UVU? We've got a lot. We're in a good location. How do we leverage that? And so setting those goals and looking at those.
That is one thing, I mean, we've been working on it, they say you need better guy. That's sponsored by Orem, we've been trying to raise some money federally for that very reason.
Because that's not widely known, right? When they're and Brandon went back to DC, they were targeting those monies to go to your point of creating more jobs, more opportunities, training for jobs. So we maybe just more on, but there's some like things that maybe we need to out there.
And we are known, I mean, we talk to agencies all the time, and we are known as having the best economic of any cities. I mean, for that effectively, that means, we help with that. County paying 48% one line, so up in school, which is 32% in the last year. So, and further, I mean, people aren't doing
And so I didn't mean to dismiss, I need to jump in. I didn't mean to be dismissive. I don't believe it's adequately addressed in the plan of what our goals are and what we're trying to achieve and accomplish and how we're going to go about doing it. I hear about access to Hobby Lobbies and Walmarts and whatever, and they provide a lot of sales tax. Got it. Tracking 100%. But what are we doing to take advantage of our talent pool? What's our strategy as a city? How do we support that with the plan in terms of what sections we're going to use and target and try to encourage business to come and, partner with us to buildings or whatever needs to be done. I just think we can do better with that.
Right, we've approved the office thing down by meters, right? Those haven't been built yet. What do we do? How do we, anyway.
I was just saying, in some of those projects right now, you're talking about is against it. This is basically like
in terms of turning the feedback into something constructive and productive, whatever it's written is, what types of business uses do we want to attract? Let's come up with some of that list. It has been a little while since we've been an in-depth update for the economic development portion of when we did that, we did do a deep dive in different kinds of retail or kinds of use. So I think that's something we can add as an additional priority.
And again, I think that comes back to zoning, right? And what is it? And what is our business zones? Because when you literally have everything under the sun in your one long list of everything, that doesn't focus things, that doesn't draw attention. And we've talked, like an example would be like having a medical area to go around our hospitals and say, this is gonna be a medical zone and we want to attract medical. And so it's specific so people see that these are the kind of things we want here.
We do have a surgical center.
We do.
Yeah.
But that land is C2 right now, and so.
To make it C6, and so it's only medical stuff.
Yeah. But anyone could put in a gas station at the front of that lot if they decided not to build.
You're gonna look at you said C3, C4.
They're almost like that.
And so that really needs to be, C3 is the transition from neighborhood, right? So that needs to be tightened up. No gas stations or whatever, because that's how we got messed up on down to.
And that's probably a step beyond what we can do in the next 6 months with getting. We probably say our goal is one of the goals that we need in Orem is to refigure out obviously better phrase than that, but that would be what I need to know. The next step.
Brandon, sorry, a piece of data I'd like to request. And just understand density versus economic status. Is there a data point where we have correlation between density per square miles and economic status of per city in Utah? That just could be, because we keep saying Orem has a great economic center, fantastic, we haven't raised for 3 years, awesome. How many other cities have done that based on how many people live in per square mile? But you see, we don't have that data, so as we go to zoning, like, we're gonna advocate for the same density, more density, less density. Other cities have much less density per square miles, and the economic status is so high, and why? Or does it have to be correlated to highest density per square mile to make sure the economic engine is moving and a lot of retail is happening? That piece of data, it could be found, because we have that, right now, we finally had a citizen bring us how many citizens per square mile live in Orem. A citizen brought it, by the way, and one of the Wilkinson Farm conversation, beautiful piece of data. But then, is there a correlation between that and the economic status of each city? Because if we have cities where it's so low in density per square mile, but the economic status so high, how can we model those values?
Or essentially, the consultant recommends that what is the tax value, tax generation of the square foot, different sections. And essentially, it showed the universities that essentially, the closer you get to the mall, State Street, this total tax generation of sales tax.
That's great. Thank you, but as far as holistically as people that live in the city.
That is another thing, because it does seem like there is certain quantities that's all about stuff.
Yeah.
It goes a little way.
Correct.
That is so broad.
But that, and we could get that piece of data, but it's possible. I mean, we have half of it, not just economic status. That would be good to know where to stop.
Yeah. Okay, well,
Thank you.
I want to thank you guys for coming, and we've got some more meetings like this. I think the goal is to make sure that the councils are aligned, we're all on the same page. And so hopefully this will give you some idea of ways to go.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hopefully I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
If I could just manage expectations just a little bit. I don't think this general plan update in 6 months will resolve all these issues. What I'm hoping it would more do is identify and give us a work program on which to build. Exactly.
Yeah. So you guys were walking there, we got, for you. I thought I'd better stop. You don't need to feel like, oh, maybe we're talking from this foul.
Thank you guys for spending that.
We have a volunteer. They're one of the new people here.
You mean to bless the food?
Yes, please.
I can bless the food. I do it often. There you go. Our Father in heaven, we are grateful this evening that we could be together as citizens and friends of this great community of Orem. We ask you to bless us, that we'll be wise in the deliberations that we have one with another, and that we will make good decisions, that we will get along with one another. We're grateful for the food that's been provided for us and ask you to bless it that will nourish and strengthen our bodies. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
We even have to numbers. We require you.
Okay, good. Watch it.